If you confidently want to be your true self, you have to let go of the expectations others have on you. Today, we're going to talk about the 3 phases of becoming your true self that I've experienced since leaving corporate America 5 years ago. 6 years ago, I was still sitting in corporate America. I was a mechanical engineer for military defense contracting, and I did not like the version of myself that I was. I didn't feel that I could be who I wanted to be in that environment, and I just felt like I was pretending to be somebody that I wasn't. I knew that there was more meant for me besides killing time behind a desk, but I just didn't know where to go. I thought that the things that I truly wanted to do just weren't possible. I was crippled by the opinions of other people. Now, this may sound dramatic, but I think a lot of people struggle with thinking about the opinions of other people and let that kind of inhibit them from doing what it is that they really want to do. I think we all kind of have this voice in our head, some sort of deep-seated belief of something that we want to be doing, a call or a voice, and a lot of us can easily not listen to that. I did for many years, just pretend it wasn't there and think that because I was on the path of what somebody else wanted, then I was successful, but I was really unhappy. So I think a lot of times we let the opinions of others stop us from doing what it is we truly feel that we want to. And, out of fear of judgment, fear of criticism, what will they say, fear of being too cringy, it's just easier to blend in and not have anybody say anything about you. So if I think back to how I started to listen to myself and what helped me to make a change and to stop being so controlled by other people's opinions, for me, it was quitting my corporate job. And while I understand that we all don't have the flexibility and ability to do that, I want to share with you what I've learned in the past 5 years since quitting my corporate job. If I really think back to who I was back then and the evolution through the past 5 years, what I've noticed is that there was these 3 sort of main phases that I found myself in. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to go into each phase and break it down to give you some tips depending on whichever one you're in. And overall, I think just having this sort of framework and context through your experience can help you, hopefully, to become more of your true self and not afraid of what other people think of you. So before we get into those 3 phases, I do want to take a minute and think about, where does this actually come from? Where does the fear of thinking about what other people think of us come from? Because a lot of times it's sort of a made up story that we're telling ourselves in our head. This person sees us like this, they must think of X, Y, and Z because of this. And, for those of you who have very familiar time with this, you understand how quickly that can cycle and how quickly you can go into this negative sort of spiral and be crippled. So yeah, I mean, if I asked myself, where does this fear come from? I think the first thing that sort of comes to mind is just wanting to be accepted. And I think as humans, we all want to be accepted and we all want to feel like we have a place and a purpose. But sometimes that feeling of wanting to be accepted sort of directs us down the wrong path. So maybe for some of us, it's people pleasing and you have people pleasing tendencies. You want to make somebody happy. You don't want them to be upset. You don't want to sort of disappoint them with what it is that you're doing or your opinions or how you're directing your life. Maybe you've done that for a while and it just sort of this automatic thinking of other people first before you think of yourself. Or maybe you're afraid that it won't work out, that whatever it is that you're striving after, the thing that you desire deep down, maybe you're afraid that if you do put all your eggs in that basket, then it won't work out and you'll be a failure. And therefore, it's not even worth trying. And all of these things I've experienced to some extent. And I think for me, thinking about that last one of being afraid that it won't work out, I've done so many different businesses and projects where I never sort of put 100% into it because I kind of saw it as like my backup plan, or if it didn't work out, then, it's okay. I didn't really try that hard anyway, or I didn't really want it that bad. So for me, it's been hard to put 100% into something that I really believed in. And if I look at all these reasons as to why I'm afraid of other people's opinions, I think they kind of all come down to one feeling of being unworthy. Again, at least for me, it just sort of feeling like what I want to do or what my thoughts lead me, the projects that I want to take, they sort of aren't good enough. And that in turn makes me believe that I'm not good enough. And, this always comes up in therapy for me, but everything's sort of rooted in this deep-seated feeling of not feeling worthy enough, not feeling like you are enough. And thinking about other people's opinions, I do it in a way where I think, people look at me and think, oh, he can't do that. He's not good enough at that. He's not good enough at music. And with that feeling of not feeling like you're enough, for me, it's felt like if I were to be the person that I am deep down, my true authentic self, I wouldn't be good enough. I wouldn't be lovable enough. I have to act a certain way in order to be okay or to be approved of other people, to have other people like me, to have other people care about me. And I found out that this is a lie. And, when you speak it out loud, it's a lot easier to realize that this is a lie. But when you're in your head and you're trapped in these negative thought patterns and these negative cycles, that feels very true. So I think, before getting into this, I just want to acknowledge that it is hard. It is hard to be the person that you want to be because you're fighting all of these things that you're telling yourself that aren't true. Okay, so let's now get into the first phase of being your true self. And the first phase is seclusion. And seclusion is a phase where you sort of, just as it sounds, you protect yourself from maybe a lot of the people that you surrounded yourself with before. Maybe you don't go out as much, or you don't involve yourself into certain friend circles, or you don't interact as much at work. And for me, I found myself spending a lot of time around people that I didn't want to be like. And, for me, it was corporate America at first. It was the people who had corporate jobs and they were living for the weekends. And for me, I didn't want that. I was working in my nights and weekends to try to escape that and to try to build a business outside of it. And for you, I mean, this is the point where we start to begin to make a change in our life. And if there's things that are around us that we want to change, this is what phase one, the seclusion phase, is. Maybe you have friends around you that are negative and not supportive. Maybe you have family that's not supportive of you. And, I'm not saying completely cut people out cold turkey, but this is where you can start to set boundaries. And if you have somebody that is not making you feel supported and encouraged for this new phase of your life, then it's time to take a step back and to just limit your time with certain people that don't make you feel good, and to start doing the opposite. An example that I have is when I was at my last corporate job, I just started the company, and the group that I was working in, everybody was very similar. They liked the same things. They all went to lunch together. They sort of hung out, took extended lunch breaks, and joked around with each other. And I started to participate in that when I first started the job because I wanted to be accepted. I cared about what they thought. But then the first step that I took was I stopped doing that. I stopped going to lunch. I stopped sort of trying to be friends with them. I didn't hang out after work. And I realized that I was a different person than them. And that's okay. It's not better or worse. I just noticed that I didn't want to be like them. I wanted to be somebody different. So what I started doing was instead of going to lunch, every lunchtime they'd round up the troops and go down to the cafeteria, and I started saying no. Instead, I started reading books on my phone, and I started, virtually surrounding myself with people that I wanted to be like. I started reading books like The 4-Hour Workweek and listening to podcasts and listening to people that were living lives that I did want to live. And this helped me significantly. So if you find yourself in this phase where maybe you're unhappy with your life and unhappy with where you're at, there's a couple steps that you can take. And I think the first step is to remove the negative people around you, to remove the unsupportive people around you. It doesn't have to be, waging war on your family or your friends, but just sort of stepping back and giving yourself more space and more time. And especially if there's one person who is really negative for you and you find yourself just feeling not good when you walk away from them, you feel like you're drained, you feel like maybe you were excited to tell them about an idea and you started telling them this and they just started poking holes in it. And then you leave that conversation and maybe you feel like, oh man, they're right. I'll never be able to do this. That's somebody who's really not a good person to have around you when you're trying to make a change in your life. You want to give yourself supportive voices and good voices that can help you along your journey to change. And even if you don't have a friend, because, sometimes you don't, and sometimes all of the people around you can be sort of negative and maybe you don't have anybody to reach out to in real life. And that's okay because like I mentioned, the first thing that I did was I surrounded myself with books that were encouraging, that were inspiring, that were showing me a different way that I could live my life other than the people that were in my direct vicinity. Some books that I read during that time that were super influential for me were books like Dark Horse, Big Magic, The Secret, Everything is Figure-Outable, The Untethered Soul, and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Another thing that you can do too, if maybe reading is not your thing, is maybe you can start listening to podcasts or watching YouTube videos, consuming content that makes you feel empowered and uplifted and excited about your life. I will, however, caveat that I myself was not a reader before this phase of my life. I started reading at my desk on my phone, while the other guys were at lunch. I'd pull up my phone and I had the Kindle app on my phone and I started reading books, and I never did that. I never read before. But after reading that book, something clicked in my head and it said, wow, you can get this knowledge and this wisdom from somebody who's done something that you want to do. And it's like you're having a conversation with them. It's like you're sitting down and talking to them. Ever since then, I've been hooked on books and they've changed my life for the better. So I encourage you, if you don't feel like you can read, I couldn't read. I never read a book in high school. I don't think I ever finished a full book before that. It's never too late to start reading. And then the last thing you can do too is you can find online communities. There's great spaces, Substack, there's, all kinds of people have Facebook groups or different sort of online communities where you can find inspiration. All right, so now we're entering phase 2 of letting go of the opinions of others. And phase 2 is exciting. It's where you find out who you are. You get to try new things and you get to learn and you get to spend time alone with yourself to figure out who you are. Because if you're like me, I was so far away from being the person that I wanted to be that I forgot the things that I liked. I didn't really even know myself that well. So in the second phase, after you've secluded yourself, you now get to spend time with yourself and learn who you are. One thing that is really helpful when you're in this phase is to simply just start talking about the things that you like. And if you're like me, I always have been very aloof, and I would never talk about the things that I liked. I would never sort of put my opinion in conversations that were more than one person because I was nervous and shy. One thing that you can do is to start talking about the things that you like. And this is crucially important because now you're allowing people to get to know you. You're talking about the things that you like, and therefore people who like those same things will be attracted to you. So once you're in this phase, the first thing that you want to start doing is noticing your joy. You want to notice when something excites you. And for me, I almost forgot what that feeling was like. I almost forgot what excitement was like. And, I think a lot of us maybe lose this when we grow into adulthood. We can forget what it feels like to, feel excited about something and joy and feel like a kid again. And when you notice that feeling, you have to follow it. Whether it's something that doesn't make any sense at all, or, something silly, or maybe you think it's, stupid. It's important because you have that feeling of joy and you want to follow that path. You want to follow down that joy and see where it leads you. You'll start to find your tribe, a group of like-minded people that care about what you have to say and will support and encourage you along your new path. An example for me is when I left my corporate job, I started my side business and, I thought it was going to take off and it didn't quite do that. So I needed to get some side jobs. And I was working in a bagel shop, and it was sort of a restaurant, sort of a cafe. And they went to farmers markets on the weekends to sell the bagels. And the person that was running the farmers markets at the time needed some help. And he kind of just mentioned to the team, like, hey, anyone interested in going to a farmer's market on the weekend? And it was beginning to get summertime, and I was thinking to myself, like, that might not be too bad, being outside selling bagels at a farmer's market. It's way less fast paced than it is in here, I would imagine. And yeah, what the heck, I'll try it out. So I ended up trying it out, and I then grew to do all of the farmers markets for that business. And it was the best thing that I could have done because it really made the job more enjoyable. And I found this new community through farmers markets that I hadn't found before, connecting with people in the area that I lived in and other business owners who were attending the markets. It was just this great all-around supportive environment, and I met some really close friends through that community. So if I didn't follow this sort of inkling of like, oh, that might be fun, then I would have never experienced everything that led down that path that I could have never imagined when I was just being asked that simple question. Some other things that you can do in phase 2 of finding yourself is things like journaling and meditating. And for me, these might sound like scary things and things that you don't want to do or you're not good at doing, but I encourage you to start in any way that you can. You don't need to be the best journaler or be able to meditate for an hour without having thoughts, just sitting for 5 minutes alone by yourself, you can really start to hear what your thoughts are going towards. You can let go the negative ones, and you can start to hear your intuition. And the more that you practice it, and the more that you just spend 5 minutes and sit with yourself, the more you'll hear your own voice. And that's something that I've noticed is that, it sometimes seems like this big, hard thing to do is like, oh, I don't have time to meditate. But if you just take 5 minutes and sit there and just listen to your thoughts, you'll start to learn more about yourself. And I think that doing it over time has gotten me to like it and to actually crave it. Not every day, but it's something that I do to center myself and to hear what it is that I truly want deep down. Journaling is another one of the things that may sound scary, but you can take a simpler approach. Something that I learned in the book, The Artist's Way, is doing something like morning pages, which is when you wake up in the morning, you just jot down anything that's in your head. And this becomes really helpful because you basically are dumping all of the thoughts, all of the worries, all of the negative stuff, even the positive stuff, and you're getting it on paper, and you get to basically, cleanse your brain, cleanse your mind, to then allow space for new thoughts and to even see what you're writing about too. Like, maybe there's something that you're desiring that you keep thinking about and you keep writing it. It becomes a lot more obvious when you're writing it down every single day. And then you can start to go down that path and think like, well, I wonder what this means. Maybe I should, look into this a little bit more. And then lastly, in finding yourself, I'm a big proponent of going to therapy if you're able, and talking out your feelings and working through and processing your feelings, because when you're able to process your emotions and not let them have such a strong hold on you, you start to get to the more inner core of yourself. And instead of being these negative learned patterns of maybe always being hard on yourself or demanding or have high expectations, you can start to see that these were just learned ways that you use to cope through your life. And they're not who you are, they're something that you do. So once you can sort of detach from maybe being the perfectionist, you can then be like, oh, well, I actually like this thing that I'm not perfect at, and maybe I can start doing it because I don't always have to be a perfectionist. So that's just one example, but going to therapy and really learning yourself, I think therapy is a great way to get to learn yourself more and to get to learn how you operate and to better be able to navigate through life with sort of the software that you got up in your brain. Not to mention just getting, positive ways to deal with things instead of maybe the negative ones that you are used to. All right, now we've finally got into phase 3, which is being yourself in spite of who you're around. So this is pretty much the phase that I've started kind of getting into myself. And it's kind of combining the first two phases, because phase one, you're secluding yourself, you're sort of removing the negative people around you. And then phase two, you're becoming yourself. Well, phase three, you're still being yourself, but now you're going back into sort of, the real world, or not being afraid to be around anybody. And this is something that I sort of noticed myself doing. I noticed that I was sort of stuck in phase two, and I would always sort of limit who I was going to be around and not do certain things that I thought weren't good for me. And then I realized that it was good while it served me to seclude myself and to protect myself. But now I'm ready to push myself a little bit more and to be who I am in spite of whoever I'm around. And this is sort of the ultimate test of becoming yourself and being yourself, is being yourself no matter who's around you. So phase two gave me a lot of practice to be myself, and to be myself with people that I'm really comfortable with. But now I'm moving into phase three, and I'm starting to be myself no matter who's around me. So this phase, I think I found myself sort of bouncing between phase two and phase three. And, phase three is definitely a practice, and things that I've noticed that have helped me to sort of stay in phase three is, exposure therapy, actually practicing, going into environments that maybe you think won't be easy or comfortable. Maybe they're going to challenge you a little bit. Maybe you'll have to talk to people who you excluded in phase one and show up in the person that you found in phase two. And, this comes again with practice, and it also will test you. I find myself doing this and coming away from a situation and not liking how I acted and being like, oh man, you weren't totally yourself there. But that's okay, because that's part of the learning of this. And you can always try again. And that's, when you find yourself in this phase, that's what you have to do. You have to keep pushing yourself and keep going into situations where it's not going to be as easy. And what happens is, with practice, you get better at it, and you get better at being who you are. And now it's not such a conscious thing. It's, you can just sort of exist as you are, and I'm not quite there yet, and that's okay. But that's the ultimate freedom, right? To exist as you are, and to not think about what other people are thinking of you, and to not change who you are based on how others are thinking of you. So what's helped me sort of go into these situations, this exposure therapy, is to sort of practice and to think about it beforehand. I noticed, I was going to this event, and I was going to see a bunch of people that I knew were going to test me because they knew the old version of me. And going into it, I was driving there, and I was thinking in my head, okay, how do I want to approach? I know this question is going to be asked. How do I want to answer it? And how do I want to answer it in a way that makes me feel empowered and not sort of looked down on? So I took some time, and I literally scripted out an answer, and it kind of sounds silly and maybe a little overthinking, and maybe it was, but it really did help me to prepare for when that question was asked, because I wasn't just frozen when that question was asked. Because a lot of times in the past, somebody's like, hey, what are you doing now? What are you up to? What are you doing for work? That question would be like, oh God, I don't have an answer that's going to make them happy, so I'm just going to fumble my way through this. But now I've sort of taken the time and prepared for this question, so now when it's asked, I won't freeze, I'll have my answer. And that's been really helpful. Another tip here is to not take things personally. Using the same example, if I'm having a conversation with somebody and I've answered in a way that maybe they don't like, I've gotten this before. You get strange looks. You get people are confused, and maybe they don't understand what you're doing. Maybe they say something mean or demeaning without really trying to aim it at you. Just not taking things personally can help you not attach to that. Somebody else is living their own life. They may have a confused look on their face. It may be involuntary. Maybe you're not doing something that they can understand right now, or it seems weird or silly, but you can have confidence that it's the right decision for you. And when you have that self-confidence, it's like a game changer, because I've always heard, everybody always tells you have good confidence, have self-confidence, but what it really means is being confident in the things that you're doing, the way that you're living. And when you can have confidence in your decisions and your choices, in spite of somebody making a weird face in front of you, that's like a really good feeling. And separating yourself and not taking it personally is a big part of that. And this, what I'm describing here, is practicing letting go. And, I'm certainly somebody who struggles with letting go, and, I overthink a lot, but we can practice sort of letting go. And, in this phase of being ourselves, it's going to be practice. So this is a process, going from somebody who doesn't feel that they can be themselves at all to somebody who's themselves no matter where they are. It takes work and it takes effort. And, you'll find yourself going back between phases, and that's okay, because it's an evolution and it's a practice. And, if I were to say, like, do I like myself more than I did 6 years ago when I was still in my corporate job? The answer is 100% yes. And, it's nice. Sometimes I'm, going for a walk and just sort of thinking about my life back then and my life now. And I don't have everything figured out, for sure, but I do feel more confidently in who I am and knowing the things that I like and chasing after the things that I want to bring to fruition, and not so much worrying too much about what other people think of me. I still struggle with it, of course, but I'm not letting it stop me and hold me back from being the person that I want to be anymore. And hopefully this video, can give you some encouragement. Maybe you resonated with some things. Maybe you can use some of these tips. Let me know in the comments about your evolution from being afraid to be yourself to being yourself, and leave a comment to help somebody else who's going through this process. And we can encourage each other, and we can be our true authentic selves and be accepted for it, and find our tribe of people. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that this has been helpful. I'm Gino from Working Towards Our Purpose podcast, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.